Dungeons in the 2D games, and especially the handheld games up until now, have been very hard to rank. It's hard to point out the differences in most of them, and so far, A Link to the Past has been the only 2D game in the series we've managed to put together a dungeon ranking from. However, with Minish Cap, it's a lot easier to find qualities in these dungeons, since they all base themselves around a special theme, and does a very good job at that. With TheOwnersofTriforce, I'm on the 1, and for the first time in a handheld Zelda game, this is our dungeon ranking from Minish Cap. The Fortress of Winds turned out to be our least favorite dungeon in this game. It's kinda hard to explain exactly why, but we find it kind of bland. It does look like a ruined structure, which it probably is supposed to be, but there's not really anything special about it. We didn't find the use of the moments to be too funny or enjoyable, especially as you have to backtrack a lot to reach different areas. Not that it doesn't matter too much, but we didn't really feel like this fortress had much wind to it either. It's hard to explain why it's our least favorite. It's just that we didn't enjoy it as much as the others. The Cave of Flames is a dungeon that does well when it comes to the actual theme. It's a fire dungeon, but clearly a mine too. It shows up very well with the minecarts and how they used wood to make the cave steady and such. This isn't a bad dungeon either, but we've kinda had enough with the minecarts from the other handheld games, as they were used a lot there. Even though it makes a lot more sense here. You know, this is a mine after all. They did put a lot of lava and fire into this dungeon, which was all good, but not good enough to make this dungeon higher than number 5 in our ranking. The first dungeon in the game is actually a very good one. What we really liked about Deepwood Shrine is that it isn't too linear or too basic of a dungeon. It's actually pretty complex to be the first one, especially thanks to the barrel in the middle. Using it to change directions for where you want to go was pretty creative, and it could open new ways from within later. It all seems to be a regular forest dungeon at first, but they mixed it up with some water elements too. So there is variation to it, as you can use the gust jar to both suck things in or blow out air. Add this with some good puzzles, and you have a very solid and enjoyable first dungeon. Ice and water dungeons can be a real pain in the ass, but the Temple of Droplets is a very good dungeon. The ice in this place isn't too slippery, and the puzzles are very fun. Somehow we've always liked the push blocks on ice puzzles in the series. It's also cool how you have to open these doors, so that light will get in and melt the ice blocks. And not just ice blocks containing keys and stuff, you have to unfreeze both the element you're seeking and the boss itself. One thing that we also liked was how you get to see the element and the boss very early. You get the boss key after going through a few rooms, before you see the huge blocks of ice containing the big Octorok and the water element. You have the swimming parts of the dungeon, which isn't too much of a pain either. And you also have to use the gust jar while standing on leaf here too, like in Deepwood Shrine. With ice, water, heat, lightness and darkness based around every puzzle and the environment, the Temple of Droplets ends up on our 3rd spot. Now, this is a dungeon that has a more windy feeling to it. That's pretty much because it's located in the sky. The Palace of Winds starts off being very linear as you walk from platform to platform, defeating enemies and solve different kinds of puzzles before you get the Rockscape, and can now jump to higher levels. It continues on being linear as you solve more puzzles, defeat more enemies and jump through platforms that probably remind us all of Super Mario World. Then you get the boss key and you now find yourself to be in a more complex area inside the dungeon. This is the more fun and challenging part. You have to fight tougher enemies, use your brain more to solve puzzles, find out where to go and what to do to get further. It's also cool that you get to be both indoors and outdoors here. It all seems very easy at first, but the dungeon becomes a lot more challenging later, and we really like the whole setting of this dungeon. I mean, how awesome isn't it to be in a palace above the clouds? what a surprise! Another final dungeon at the top! It seems obvious sometimes, but we really do think this through. Anyway, our number 1 dungeon is Dark Hyrule Castle. While it's now taken over by Vata and gave the name extra word with dark, it doesn't really feel as dark as, say, Ganon's Castle from Ocarina of Time. But we shouldn't be that picky. This is a very good dungeon to end the game with. It doesn't really have things from earlier parts in this game, that we've mentioned before that we like so much in the final dungeon, like previous bosses like in Wind Waker and A Link to the Past, or something from previous dungeons like in Ocarina of Time. What we got is a huge dungeon with very tough enemies, complex structure, and very dark atmosphere outside of the dungeon at least. It really is weird that when you're outside in the dungeon area, you only see darkness below, but when you go out through the main entrance, everything is bright, and the world doesn't seem to be in danger at all. To mention one last thing, we do appreciate that they used a remade version of the Hyrule Castle theme from A Link to the Past. Because of a huge, complex structure, tough enemies, dark atmosphere, going both in and outside, and great puzzles, we decided that Dark Hyrule Castle is the best dungeon in Minish Cap. Hey guys, if you like this video, you should totally click that like button. And we're always happy to get comments. If you want to see more upcoming videos, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.